What it do, what it do, what it do, soul visionaries and potential soul visionaries out there. I am your grateful soul brother, Cherrard Cohen, and you are now rocking with the SoulVizion Powercast. You know that place where we keep it unfiltered and raw, and we talk about anything from porn to politics. We'll even talk about the things you might have heard or even saw. Now, today, we're going to talk about something that usually does not explode. It usually does not explode. It slowly erodes. Listen, it doesn't explode, but it slowly erodes. This is what happens to many of our relationships, be it platonic, romantic, business, whatever type of relationship, it usually erodes over time. But today, we're going to concentrate on the romantic relationships, but it can happen to all relationships. Let's kick it. Now, I know you all are asking, what can cause a healthy relationship to go from sugar to shit? It's simple. It's called resentment. Resentment. Now, it has been said that resentment is like the water that runs down the mountainside, year after year, cutting a groove through solid rock. The water isn't angry, it isn't loud, it isn't violent, it's just consistent. Consistent. And see, this is how resentment works. It doesn't have to scream to destroy a relationship, it just keeps on flowing and flowing, slowly eroding away the patience, the intimacy, the communication, the trust, and eventually the love itself dissipates. Everything goes eventually, but it doesn't happen overnight. See, by the time most people realize what's going on, the damage is done. It's already too late. It's done. You know, that resentment is a cold piece. You know, the groove has become the groove that the water drops or the resentment drops created has become so deep that every disagreement naturally flows or follows in the same destructive path. That's why healthy relationships don't wait. That's why when you have a healthy relationship, you shouldn't wait till you're drowning in resentment. You know, try to have those conversations up front. And I know we've been talking about that the last few podcasts, but resentment is a hell of a thing. You know, you have to talk. Y'all both have to listen. Y'all have to both know how to forgive, because we all do shit that the other person looks at maybe not as bad, but it get on your nerves. You know what I'm saying? We all do something that gets on our partner's nerves. You feel me? It's not like we're these angelic individuals and we just so nice. And nope, we all have our quirks. We all have our things that pisses our partners off. You know what I'm saying? You know, we have to learn how to address the small hurts before they become permanent scars. That resentment, man, that shit festers for too long, and then it just keeps building and building and building, because resentment isn't built in one day. It's carved over time, and one unresolved conversation at a time. One unresolved conversation at a time. Every time you put something on the back burner, there you have it. Your relationship rarely ends because of one bad day, man. Your shit ends because of thousands of unspoken moments. And every time you ask somebody and they say, I'm good, are they good, or are they just holding everything in? Now, what does resentment look like? One of the biggest misconceptions about resentment is that people think it's always yelling, arguing, slamming doors. Most of the time it isn't. Resentment is just quiet. You know, it hides behind attitudes, the behaviors, the emotional distance, until one day the relationship feels completely different. We're going to break this down. So we're going to talk about the children of resentment. You know what I'm saying? These are some of the children of resentment. You know, some of them. Like, child number one is keeping score. right? You want to keep score, and when every little mistake is made, it gets added to this invisible scoreboard in our mind. We just keep piling it on, piling on. You stop seeing what's good in that person because you're hyper focused on what they may have done. The little things, it's always them little things that keep adding up. Instead of addressing the issues as they as they're happening, you're saving them. They keep piling up until one day an argument starts over something stupid, right? It's going to be something real small. It could be dishes undone, clothes left on the floor, the lights on. Now, we know that's not the real issue. The issue is about something that may have happened a while ago that went unaddressed. But we just keep letting it fester. The argument isn't because of those dishes. We know this. It ain't because of the clothes on the floor. It's not because of the lights were left on. It's because you've been collecting evidence instead of having conversations about the things that were bothering you at that time. You're just letting it build up, build up, build up. Healthy relationships solve problems through communications. Unhealthy relationships keep score. Now you got to ask yourself, and you got to be brutally honest. Am I looking for solutions, or am I just loading up ammunition to fire whenever the opportunity presents itself? Ask yourself, because we know, hey, I've done it. I'm quite sure you've done it. We've all done it. We don't speak on it right away. But man, as soon as we get the opportunity, that person might say that one thing that triggers it off. You know what you did on April 9th, 2011? You know what you did? And you start coming with names, dates, times, the whole 9 yards. We can't do that. We can't let it build up. We got to have those conversations as soon. That's if you want to save your relationship. That's if you want your relationship. That's if you value your relationship. You got to start speaking on these things up front. You can't let it fester. You cannot let it fester. Now we're going to talk about another one of them bad children, emotional withdrawal. That's another one of these bad kids, right? Emotional withdrawals. Now, I've been through this one. I've encountered this one. I've been on both sides of the fence. This joint right here is dangerous because many of us make the mistake of confusing silence for peace. Silence for peace. And hey, fellas, hey, just because your lady is not talking, ladies, just because your dude ain't talking, he ain't arguing, he ain't fussing, they not cussing, they not complaining, it doesn't mean everything is okay. Sometimes this is just a sign that they may have just given up. You know what I'm saying? Maybe they don't want to share their thoughts anymore. You barely see them smile or laugh, if at all. They stop opening up to you. They stop being vulnerable. You know what I mean? They keep everything to themselves. They no longer tell you what's on their mind because they starting to begin to think like, hey, ain't nothing gonna change. This shit is just gonna be what it is. And like I said, I've been there. I have been here. So this is like a personal thing for me, as well as, hey, I'm learning new stuff on every time I step on this platform to speak on stuff. Yeah, I've gone through a lot of these things, but then there's things that I learn from doing research on stuff, listening to other people, So, like I said, your person may have gotten to the point where what's the point? Why am I going to sit down and talk to this person and ain't shit going to change? What's the point? Now, some people will mentally and emotionally withdraw, but still find a way to show up physically for a time to time, But eventually, that this will even disappear. This going to dissipate. And then by the time they create that physical distance from you, they had already left a long time ago. So you're basically in this one-person relationship with the shell of the person you love, that used to love you. They already left. They done checked out. Like a hotel. Hey, they done checked out. They checked out before 11. You feel me? So that's what we have to do is communication, man. Communication is the key. And we got to have open, honest communication. Because after they emotionally withdraw, man, it's like they think it first. Oh, boo, boo, boo. They fight with it. Then they feel it. That's that emotional. And then nexus, they act it out. So they really withdraw, mentally first, then emotionally, then physically. They're out. Mentally, emotionally, physically. It's done. Another one of these bastard children is called sarcasm. Don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. Everybody, we all kick it, we all joke, and we tease folks. But resentment shows up, it disguises itself as, humor, although they're really insults. You know what I'm saying? We've all heard somebody say something hurtful. We've all said something hurtful. Then we'll, hey, hey, I'm just joking. I'm playing. Especially when you don't get the kind of response that you thought you were going to get. Hey, I'm joking. No, for real. I'm just joking. Nah, player, they weren't joking. That they were telling you the truth with a smile. That's all. They were telling you the truth with a smile. And instead of, and since they didn't receive it, and since you didn't receive it the way they thought you would, now it's one of them things like, oh, no, I'm joking. But sarcasm becomes a weapon when it's used to embarrass, belittle, or take shots at someone instead of having an honest conversation. Instead of saying, I feel ignored, they say, oh, I forgot. The world revolves around you. That's resentment talking. Healthy communication, ask what's wrong. Resentment, hide behind jokes. Just start to pay attention more and more to your partner. And maybe it's one of them things where you have to lead by example, where you have to start allowing yourself to open up and kick it, especially if you feel like you've been pulling back. Sit your partner down. Y'all have to be able to learn how to kick it and talk about these things. And I mean, how else are you going to solve anything if you don't communicate? Number 4, lack of affection. Lack of affection. Now I told you, these are the bastard children of resentment. And see, let's understand that affection is just not a physical thing. It's attention, it's kindness, it's compliments, it's checking in, it's hugs, it's holding hands, it's saying, I appreciate you. But when resentment grows, affection begins to disappear. People stop doing the little things that once came naturally. Buying cards, flowers, picking up the little pieces of candy that you wanted. Oh, damn, she liked chocolate. All that stuff, it starts to disappear. They didn't forget to do it. Trust me, they didn't forget. They just, emotionally, they're no longer connected to you. So affection is often the first casualty of unresolved hurt. And if neither one of y'all notice it, that distance is slowly going to become a normal thing. Y'all being apart from each other. You're not kissing. Y'all used to come in the house kissing, leave kiss. Hey, before I leave, give me a kiss. Bye. Come in the house. Hey, baby, boom, boom, boom. All that stuff starts to disappear over time when that resentment starts to build up. And it builds up because we don't talk about the things that's bothering us at that time. We're holding it in. And yeah, it's gonna be hard. Yeah. Another one of these little bastards, little bastard children are lack of empathy. Lack of empathy can be a symptom and a consequence of resentment. It doesn't always start out that way, but as resentment grows, empathy begins to disappear. One of the first casualties, and remember, lack of affection was the first one. This is just one of the first ones of casualties of resentment. And it's like it takes root. You stop trying to understand your partner's perspective because you've become too consumed by your own pain. You don't want to hear it. I don't care. No, you hurt me. I don't want to hear nothing you got to say. Like I said, we've all been there. I mean, if we just open up and we're honest, hey, we've hurt people and been hurt, right? So we can open up and listen to people, but for that person that's holding the resentment, There's only so much that a person can do to get you to open up. You have to want to open up. If you don't want to, no one can force you. So instead of asking why did they do that, you start saying, here we go again, here they go again. You stop giving them the benefit of doubt, and you start assuming the worst. You hear that? You take every little thing they do and turn it into something they're doing against you. You know, resentment will shift your perspective. It'll shift it. You'll begin interpreting innocent actions as intentional slights. You know, they could be genuinely joking. Now you're taking it as they're trying to hurt your feelings. You know, you're taking everything too personal now. You know, compassion decreases. You know, other struggles become less important to you because your unresolved hurt dominates your thinking. You know, your listening becomes defensive instead of understanding. You know, you're not trying to understand anything. You're just automatically ready to rip into somebody. You know, you ready for the fight. You're waiting to respond, not to understand. Your grace disappears. You don't have the tolerance to listen anymore. You know, the mistakes you once overlooked are now you can't forgive those mistakes. You know, the things you tolerated before, they're no longer tolerable. You become emotionally unavailable. And it's difficult to comfort someone you've quietly begun to resent. Resentment doesn't just change how you feel about someone, it changes how you see them. The person you once gave grace to becomes the one you judge. The person you once tried to understand becomes the person you assume is against you. That's when empathy leaves the relationship. And once empathy walks out the front door, resentment invites bitterness in through the back door, through the crevices and cracks of the pavement, and opening the windows up. Every unresolved hurt is another drop of water. Remember that drop of water that eroded the side of the mountain? Well, every unresolved hurt is just another added drop of water going down the side of that mountain. Because see, at first, you barely saw that groove. Remember the groove in the rocks. You didn't see it at first. It was just, oh, look at that water just coming down the side. You didn't see it at first as destructive. But after years of letting hurt go unspoken, that groove becomes so deep that empathy cannot cross it anymore. Another one of the children of resentment is passive aggression. Passive aggression is when people refuse to say what's bothering them, but they make sure you feel it. You feel something is wrong, but they just won't admit it. You know, instead of communicating with you, they punish you. They give you these one-word answers. They intentionally become unavailable. They ignore your call. They slam doors. They become cold. They make little comments designed to hurt you, designed to sting, designed to make you go, oh, damn, why? Why are they doing this? You thinking to yourself, why? And see, they're hoping that you magically figure out what's wrong. You know, you're asking, but they don't want to tell you. They just want you to figure it out on your, if you pay attention to me enough, and if you do this, you do that, you will know what's wrong. But here's the truth. Mind reading never fixed their relationship. Communication has, though. You know, we can't use telepathy to figure out what's wrong. We got to communicate. And see, passive aggression delays the healing. Honest conversations creates the healing. We got to be honest with ourselves, and we got to be honest with our partners. We have to have those conversations, man. Sometimes those conversations might sting, but if y'all built your relationship on a strong foundation, you can open up, you can talk, you can tell your partner, hey, look, when you did such and such, I felt a certain way when you did such and such. You got to explain yourself. Quit expecting people to read your damn mind. You know, and if you're going to cut somebody off, if that's your intention of cutting somebody off, then I don't see any reason of talking to anybody if you're not trying to resolve the issue. You feel me? So here's the soul reflection. As you're listening to me today, right? As you're listening to me, I want you to ask yourself some honest questions. Now, have you been keeping score instead of solving problems? Have you been keeping score instead of solving problems? Ask yourself that. Have I emotionally checked out without telling anyone why? Are you expecting them to read your mind? You know what I'm saying? Do you hide your frustrations behind sarcasm? Because I know I have. I know I have. I know me. I can look myself, I can look at that man in the mirror, and I can be honest with them and say, damn, I know I did that. I know I've stopped. And, have you stopped showing affection because you're carrying unresolved hurt? And I hear a lot of people especially on this internet, man. People love to claim that the internet isn't real, but the internet is a very real place with real people with real problems. And they're all trauma bonding together. When you listen to people, I don't need intimacy, I don't need affection, I just need money. That's somebody they've been taken up and through this, man, up and through there. It's really messed up when an individual would rather replace love and affection with some money. Ask yourself, have you been communicating? Like I said before, are you expecting people to read your mind? Because resentment doesn't usually destroy relationships overnight. It destroys them one unspoken feeling at a time. Now, what's the cost of staying silent? Every ignored feeling becomes emotional debt. Eventually, somebody's come to collect it. Emotional debt. And when you're saying, every ignored feeling becomes an emotional debt, that means, hey, you can intentionally ignore your partner, or they can feel like you're doing it. However it happens, that debt, that emotional debt that's been collected, it's gonna spew out. It's gonna spew out all over the place. And it's gonna come probably at the most inopportune time while you're out with family. Could be in a store. I've seen people in the store, man. I remember going to Home Depot. Brother was in there, and he said something. The lady was on one of those scooters, so she wasn't really getting around well, and it looked to be the grandchild with them. And she said something to him. Brother didn't say nothing. You could see him. It just shut down, and dude just walked out. Left them both there. You see what I'm saying? So we got to stop holding this stuff in. And if you are the one holding it in, you got to ask yourself, do I want to resolve this? Do I want to heal what we got going on? Because whether you stay with this person or not, you have to heal those unresolved hurts in order for you to move forward with your life. Be it with your partner, with another person, or by yourself. You still need to resolve those unresolved hurts. Those wounds that you have, those emotional wounds, you have to heal those before you can move forward. Now, I've always said, for me, I can forgive you, but I ain't gonna fuck with you no more. So forgiveness is not forgetting what happened. Forgiveness, doesn't excuse anybody's behavior. But when you forgive somebody, you're just releasing that emotional weight. You gotta let it go. I don't gotta fuck with you, but I forgive you though. I forgive you. And I tell people all the time, I'm not mad at anybody. I've forgiven you, and I've moved on. I'm smooth. I'm going on about my business. Now, if that person that was mad at me at one point wants to come back, the door is always open if nothing really bad has happened. If it's just an argument or whatever, the door's always open. But I forgive you. But for right now, I'm not fucking with you, and I didn't forget, but you're forgiven. And I'm going to keep it moving. And I see you when I see you. Now, one thing that is going to help everything, and it's funny, when you look at our political climate, when you look at business, everything can be healed with a good conversation, a good, realistic, down-to-earth conversation. You can't heal nobody, you cannot heal what nobody is willing to acknowledge, right? So healing begins with honesty. That's what they say. So you can't expect a person to read your mind to figure out what's wrong with you and then y'all heal. You gotta open yourself up, become vulnerable, and let that person know. Let those people know what it is that we're fighting over. and it's like, how can you move forward when you're still carrying all this hurt forward with you? How can you do that? Because then now you're expecting the next person to come into your life to be this magical savior, or this person that's going to take in all of what you got, to bring all that emotional baggage. You're expecting that person to come in and carry that emotional baggage with you. You're expecting that person to say, oh, you know what? I know the last guy hurt you, the last woman hurt you, and I'm going to sit here and I'm going to take all the punches you wish you would have gave them. No, you gotta, either with that person that you were with, you gotta let it go, ask for forgiveness, give forgiveness. You gotta get that shit off you. Gotta get it off you. We're gonna talk about our final soul reflection. We've talked about a lot of things. We've talked about the children of resentment. Now you gotta ask yourself, what am I still carrying? Am I still carrying this the emotional baggage from a previous relationship? Am I still carrying that? Am I carrying the emotional baggage that I've been packing during this relationship? Have I spoken to this person, right? You got to ask yourself, who do I need to forgive? Now start with yourself first. Forgive yourself first, right? Release that. Then ask yourself, who do I need to forgive? And then you say, what conversations have I avoided because it feels uncomfortable? Were you hiding or avoiding conversations because you feel, hey, they're going to hurt? Because they say love doesn't hurt, but it does. Because when you love someone, you tell them the truth. And sometimes the truth does hurt. You're not trying to intentionally hurt them, but sometimes that truth does sting a little bit. Here's my closing thought. Resentment isn't loud, it's quiet. That's what makes it so dangerous. It's 2026, we still in the mix, and we're gonna rise, and we're gonna fly. Peace.